My life changed overnight. Love, loss, and a new beginning. I never expected my life to change the way it did when I met Rachel and her daughter, Emily. It started like most things do. Unplanned, unexpected, and entirely outside of my control. At 38, I had built my life a certain way. I had a good job as a project manager for a construction company in Chicago, a decent apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and a routine that kept me occupied. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't exactly fulfilled either. I had relationships before, but nothing that lasted. Nothing that felt like it could be permanent. Rachel came into my life by chance, as these things often happen. We met at a bookstore one evening after work. I don't even remember why I had gone in there. I wasn't much of a reader, but something had drawn me inside. She was standing by the biographies, flipping through a book with this absent-minded look on her face, like she was somewhere else entirely. I noticed her before she noticed me. There was something calm about her, something grounded. We struck up a conversation, first about the book she was holding, then about other things. We talked about the city, about places we liked, about how hard it was to meet genuine people. It felt easy in a way I wasn't used to. Over the next few weeks, we started seeing each other more. Coffee, lunch, dinner. It all just fell into place. Rachel was 35, a marketing consultant, and a widow. She told me about her husband, Greg, who had passed away in an accident 2 years ago. She spoke about him with a quiet sadness, the kind that never really fades, but she wasn't bitter. She had accepted it as much as someone can. She had a daughter, Emily, who was 9 years old. That part made me hesitate at first. I had never seriously considered fatherhood, much less stepping into a situation where a child had already lost her dad. Rachel was cautious about introducing me to Emily, and I respected that. When it finally happened, it wasn't under any grand circumstances. Just a casual meeting at a small park near Rachel's house. It was late September, the air crisp, leaves just starting to turn. Emily sat on the swings, quiet and observant, while Rachel and I made small talk. I could tell right away that Emily wasn't thrilled about me being there. She barely spoke, only answering questions when she had to. There was no warmth, no curiosity, just a quiet distance, like she had already decided I didn't belong. I understood why. Her father wasn't just gone. He had been taken from her. A sudden absence, one she had no choice in. It wasn't just grief she was holding on to. It was loyalty. Letting me in, even a little, probably felt like a betrayal to her dad's memory. So I didn't push. I didn't try to win her over with jokes or gifts or forced conversations. I just let her be, hoping that in time, she'd at least tolerate my presence. The next few times I saw Rachel, Emily was there too. She didn't make it easy. If we were at Rachel's house, she'd stay in her room with the door closed. If we went out somewhere, she'd walk a few steps ahead or behind, never beside me. When she did speak, it was mostly to her mother, short and to the point. I could feel her watching me sometimes, sizing me up, trying to figure out if I was a threat or just an inconvenience. One evening, Rachel invited me over for dinner. It was the first time I had really been inside their home for more than a few minutes. Their house was cozy, well lived in. A mix of modern and warm, filled with photographs and small touches that made it clear a family had been built there. Greg's presence was still in that house. His pictures on the wall, his books on the shelf. It was a house that had known love and loss. Emily sat across from me at the table, eating quietly, eyes flickering to me occasionally. I asked her about school, what subjects she liked. She shrugged. I asked if she had any hobbies. Another shrug. Rachel tried to encourage her, but I could see Emily didn't want to be part of this moment. To her, I was an outsider forcing my way into something that wasn't mine. I left that night feeling a mix of emotions. I liked Rachel. I liked her a lot, but I also knew this wasn't just about us. It was about Emily too, and she wasn't ready to let me in. I couldn't blame her for that. I had stepped into her world uninvited, and trust wasn't something I could demand from her. It had to be earned. I didn't know how long it would take, or if she'd ever let me in at all. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to walk away just because it was difficult. Rachel was worth it. Emily was worth it. Even if she didn't see it yet, I was willing to wait. When Rachel was admitted to the hospital, everything seemed to shift in an instant. The reality of her condition made everything else seem trivial. I found myself taking on a new role, one I hadn't entirely anticipated. My visits to the hospital became routine, early mornings before work and evenings after, bringing her whatever she needed. I quickly learned the difference between medications, the best foods for recovery, and the small comforts that made her hospital stay a little less grueling. Each time I entered her hospital room, she would smile weakly, expressing gratitude, though I knew she was struggling with the entire situation. She wasn't the type to rely on others, and I could tell this was difficult for her. Meanwhile, Emily was staying at her friend's house. But that arrangement couldn't last forever. The question of who would take care of Emily while Rachel recovered loomed over us. I knew the answer before anyone even asked. It made sense, I cared about them both and I wanted to help. I offered to move into Rachel's house temporarily to look after Emily. It was practical. Someone needed to be there, and Rachel wouldn't have to worry about her daughter while she focused on getting better. Rachel hesitated at first. We were still in the early stages of our relationship, and I could tell she was unsure about letting me into their home in such an intimate way. But in the end, she agreed, understanding that Emily needed someone she could rely on. Emily, on the other hand, reacted with indifference. She didn't protest, but she certainly didn't seem thrilled. I knew she was still guarded. Losing her father had left an undeniable mark, and I was just another outsider trying to find a place in her world. Moving into Rachel's house was an adjustment for all of us. The house itself was cozy but filled with memories of a life I wasn't a part of. Pictures of Rachel, Emily, and her late husband were displayed in various places, on the walls, on bookshelves, on the refrigerator. I respected that. This wasn't my space. I was just a temporary fixture in their lives. I tried to keep my presence as unobtrusive as possible, yet I wanted Emily to know I was there for her. At first, she barely acknowledged me. She was polite but distant. Mornings were quiet as she got ready for school. I would make breakfast, pancakes, eggs, toast, whatever I thought might make her feel at ease, but she would eat in silence, murmuring a quick thank you before heading out the door. Evenings were much the same. I helped her with homework, offered to watch TV together, but she always kept a wall up between us. I didn't take it personally. She needed time. Slowly, though, I began to see small changes. One evening, after I had made spaghetti, her favorite, according to Rachel, she lingered at the table a little longer than usual. She still didn't say much, but she didn't rush away either. Another time, she asked if I could help her with a school project, something she had initially insisted she didn't need help with. These little moments felt like progress, like cracks in the barrier she had built between us. One afternoon, she came home from school looking upset. I didn't press her about it, but I made sure to be around if she wanted to talk. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, while I read a book nearby. After a long silence, she sighed and muttered something about a friend who had let her down. It wasn't much, but it was the first time she had voluntarily shared something with me. I listened, nodding, offering reassurance without pushing. Days turned into weeks, and our routine started to feel natural. I wasn't replacing anyone, and I wasn't trying to. I just wanted to be there in whatever way Emily would allow. I continued taking care of the house, cooking meals, making sure Emily had everything she needed. Little by little, she became more comfortable. She still had moments of coldness, but they were less frequent. I caught glimpses of something else, trust, maybe even acceptance. Rachel's recovery was going well, and soon, she would be discharged. I wondered how things would change once she was home. Would Emily retreat back into her shell? Would the progress we had made disappear? I wasn't sure. But for now, I focused on the present, on the small victories, and on proving through actions, not words, that I was here to stay. Rachel's recovery had been going well, or so we thought. The doctors had assured us she was making progress, and we believed them. But then, one evening, things took a turn. I remember sitting at home when the hospital called. Something was wrong. We rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding in my chest, and Emily was worried too. Rachel had suffered complications. The doctors were preparing her for an emergency operation. We sat in that waiting room for what felt like an eternity, watching as nurses and doctors moved quickly through the corridors. Emily barely spoke, and I couldn't blame her. What could either of us say? The night dragged on, and at some point, Emily fell asleep on the couch, curled up in her oversized hoodie, her breathing soft and even. I sat upright, staring at the door, waiting for any news. Then the doctor came out. I knew. Before he even said a word, I knew. There was something in the way he walked, the way his eyes dropped slightly as he approached me. My stomach clenched, and my hands went numb. He sat down beside me, and his words confirmed my worst fear. Rachel hadn't made it. Her heart had given out during the operation, and despite everything they tried, they couldn't save her. I couldn't speak. The words just hovered in the air, unreal, impossible. My brain refused to process them. I looked over at Emily, still sleeping, unaware that her world had just changed forever. My hands were shaking as I reached out to touch her shoulder. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. I didn't want to wake her. I didn't want to tell her. Not yet. I carried her to the car in my arms, her head resting against my shoulder. She was so light, so fragile. She didn't even wake up as I buckled her into the seat. The entire drive home was a blur. My thoughts were a jumbled mess of disbelief and sorrow. How was I supposed to tell her? How was I supposed to handle this? Rachel was gone. Just gone. The next morning, Emily knew something was wrong. I could see it in her face the moment she woke up. She looked at me, her eyes searching for an answer, but she didn't ask the question outright. I sat down next to her, took a deep breath, and told her. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I failed. The words came out broken, barely above a whisper. Rachel is gone. Emily stared at me, blinking as if trying to make sense of what I had just said. And then, all at once, she started crying. Not just crying, sobbing. Her whole body shook with the force of it. I pulled her into my arms, and we cried together. I had no words of comfort, nothing that could make this any easier. I just held her and let her cry. The funeral came too soon. It felt unreal, standing there in the cemetery, listening to people say their goodbyes. Emily clung to my side the entire time, her small hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. I didn't let go. She didn't speak, not once. She just stood there, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. I wanted to be strong for her, but I wasn't sure how. After the funeral, child services stepped in. Since Rachel was gone and I wasn't Emily's legal guardian, she was taken into their care temporarily. It was another blow, another loss in an already unbearable situation. But I didn't argue. I knew they were just doing their job, making sure she was placed somewhere safe. I promised Emily I wouldn't leave her. I would do whatever it took to bring her home. Now, I spend my days preparing the adoption papers. It's a long process, filled with meetings, home visits, and endless paperwork, but I don't care how long it takes. In 1 week, the papers will be finalized, and I will be able to take Emily home where she belongs. Until then, I visit her as often as I can, twice a week, sometimes more. Every time I see her, she looks a little sadder, a little more distant. I try to share this sadness with her, to let her know she's not alone. But I know nothing I say can take away her pain. I just hope, in time, she will see that I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere.